G'day, welcome back to the channel. Hey, if you're still drinking lagers that look like hazy New England IPAs, then this video's for you. You're certainly in the right place. Today, I'm going to cover cold crashing and finings. We'll cover what they are, how to use them safely, and I'll give you some tips that I've learnt over hundreds of brews. We'll talk about how to avoid oxygen suckback, how to use different finings, and even how to get them into your fermenter without making a mess or oxidising your beer. By the end of this, you'll be pulling pints that are bright, clear, and pub quality. Now, here's the funny bit. I worked my arse off for years to make clear beer, and then hazy suddenly became the new cool kid on the block. But if you're like me and still love a pint that looks the part, I'll show you how to get there without fancy centrifuges or filters. Let's hook in. So what is cold crashing? Cold crashing is pretty simple. It's just dropping the temperature of your beer down to about that 1 or 2 degrees once fermentation's finished. When the beer gets that cold, yeast, hop matter and protein, it all clumps together and it just settles out to the bottom. Think of it like a snow globe. When it's shaken, everything's floating around, drop the temperature and it all falls out. So that's great, we know what cold crashing is, so when do we do it? Here's a trap that beginners fall into all the time. Cold crashing too early. Don't hit that go button on your temperature controller the moment you see final gravity. The yeast need time to clean up after themselves. Give them at least 48 hours at room temperature or a couple of degrees above your fermentation temperature after you've hit that stable gravity. That way, they reabsorb the diacetyl and acetaldehyde and polish up the beer. If you crash it too soon, you'll lock in the buttery or fruity off flavours. I almost guarantee it. So let's talk about some of the downsides to cold crashing. When your beer cools, the air inside your fermenter contracts. In a standard bucket fermenter, that means it can suck sanitizer or oxygen from the air back in through the airlock. In an all-rounder or other pressure fermenter, if you don't keep a bit of CO2 pressure behind the spunding valve, the whole thing can implode. And for those of us still using glass carboys, that temperature difference, as well as a tiny fault in the glass, can cause the whole thing to crack or explode like a glass hand grenade. Now, this isn't the only solution, but it's one you can put together pretty cheaply. You've probably seen me use a water bladder with a check valve before. Look, that works great, but here's something I've been tinkering with. So it's a simple CO2 capture system made from 2 mason jars and some 1/2-inch silicon tubing that I had laying around, as well as a couple of 3D printed parts. During fermentation, the CO2, it fills these jars. Then when you cold crash and the beer starts sucking air back in, instead of dragging in sanitizer oxygen, it just pulls in its own CO2. So initially you fill the first jar about half full of water, and then as it forces out and over into the second jar, it creates another airlock, and then as the oxygen or the air inside your fermenter shrinks, it sucks the water back over into the first jar and it allows the pressure to equalise with CO2 that's been produced from the fermentation. So most people can get their hands on mason jars, and if you've got a 3D printer or know someone who does, you can knock this up for bugger all. Look, I'll put still files in the description so you can download them and print them yourself. Now, there are commercial versions of this floating around in the US, but once you add shipping and import duties, you're looking around about nearly 200 Aussie bucks landed. That's ridiculous. This way, you've got a solution that works, it doesn't break the bank, and it keeps the oxygen out of your beer where it belongs. Again, I'll drop the still files in the description, download them, print them, use them, and if you make improvements, chuck them in the comments so others can benefit too. All right. With oxygen exposure dealt with, let's move on to how we can really supercharge clarity with fining. So I think it's worth mentioning a quick safety tip. If you CIP with sodium hydroxide straight after you've cold crashed and racked the beer off, make sure you leave the racking port open. Here's why. Caustic reacts with CO2 to form sodium carbonate and water. That reaction sucks the gas out of the headspace and drops the pressure like a stone. With no vacuum relief valve, your fermenter can crush like a beer can. Stainless or plastic, it doesn't matter. Same principle as an oil drum collapsing when it's cooled and it's sealed. So, make sure that the racking port is open on your fermenter and it'll stay looking like a fermenter instead of a piece of modern art. So, cold crushing alone does a pretty decent job by itself, but if you want that real wow factor, then Clarity Finings are going to be your best friend. So, Gelatin is my go-to. It's cheap, it's fast, and it's effective, and more importantly, it's not vegan friendly, which brings me a whole stack of joy. Look, vegans are like CrossFitters. They completely ignore the first rule of Fight Club and they just never shut up about it. So, vegans, when they drink beer, they're already drinking yeast, which are living organisms too, and that just makes me laugh. So yeast have rights too, you know, even though they're not fluffy and cute like that little bunny or that cow that you're about to eat. So gelatin binds proteins and drops the haze out in cold beer. It might take a couple of days, but the polish that it gives is incredible. All right, I know the vegans are gonna come at me. So colloidal silica, it's vegan friendly, it works well, you just gotta be careful with it because it can strip the flavour out of your beer. Next is PVPP. I'll put a name of it up here. It's a challenge on the piss word. So it's a fancy term for microplastics. Commercial breweries love it. It removes polyphenols, but it's expensive. So if you read some of the older literature, they'll talk about isinglass. It's not glass, it's collagen from fish swim bladders. It's brilliant for car scales and it's been used for centuries, but it's pretty hard to get and it's not vegan. Again, that's a win in my book. Gelatin does a similar job and it's cheaper. So Clarity Ferm. You add this at yeast pitch and it helps with clarity and it reduces gluten. It's good if you've got that mate that reckons he'll puff up like a blowfish after one sip. Downsides, it's pricier and doesn't make your beer gluten-free. It just lowers the gluten. So don't go telling your mates that it's safe if they're a celiac. It'll just put them offside and you'll be on their hit list. Fight. So my recommendation for 99% of home brewers is Gelatin. If that's no good and you're a vegan, try silica or PVPP. They're all you'll ever need. If you want to spend a few extra bob, get into the Clarity Ferm. It is a good product and it saves a whole lot of mucking around, but again, you're paying for that convenience. Let's dive over and have a look at how we prepare gelatin to go in this fermenter. So here's how we get our gelatin ready and to do it properly. We're going to spray everything down with our Star Sand. And I've already done the jug. Just make sure that we cover everything that's going to touch the beer because again, the last thing we want to do is introduce an infection after we've done all that hard work. So in my Pyrex, I've boiled the water and I've let it cool to about 70 degrees and I've measured out 100 mils of water, thereabouts. So what we're going to do is I've measured out 3 grams or half a teaspoon of powdered gelatin and we're just going to sprinkle it over the surface. And you don't want to dump it out, otherwise it'll clump. So you just want to sprinkle it just over the surface. And just take your time with it. The last thing you want to do is just dump it in there. All right, now that that's done, we're going to cover our jug with alfoil and leave it for 10 minutes to bloom. And then once that's bloomed, we're going to stir it and gently until it's dissolved and let it come back up to room temperature, and then we'll get it ready to put in the fermenter. And now we need to have a quick word from our sponsor, which is me, Doghouse Brewing. So if you're getting value out of this video, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow. And it means I don't have to start flogging dodgy gear or worse, talk about ball shavers or VPNs or some discount browser plugin that saves you 2 cents while selling off all your metadata to someone in China.
Can I take an order, please?
Hey, and if you've already subscribed, thanks very much. You're an absolute legend for supporting the channel. Oh, have I told you how good these shavers are? I'm kidding. Let's get back into it. Righto, so it's been 10 minutes. All I've got is a jug and a funnel and a soft drink bottle with a bit of star sand in it and a carb cap on the end. Now you can use your PET beer bottles, but for the purposes of this, I've just got an empty soft drink bottle so you can see what's going on. All right, so our gelatin sat for 10 minutes. We're just gonna give it a mix with our sanitised spoon. And you just want to make sure that it's all dissolved. From there, we're going to take our carb cap off, put our sanitised funnel in. I like to sit mine in the jug itself, and you'll see why in a sec. And just simply pour our gelatin in our water. Into our soft drink bottle, and we're just going to let that cool down right down to room temperature. Get rid of that and put our carb cap on. Now I'm sure someone's going to ask, but what I've done is I've cut the barb piece off this carb cap, and this is the one that I use for delivering the fining agents into my all-rounders. That way you don't end up with that, you know, little bit of dead space there. It seems to get it all. We're going to put 40 PSI into this bad boy, and it's not going to want to sit by itself, up by itself anymore. It'll become drunk, and that's what the jug's for. So let's do that. You can see the bum of the bottle has just popped itself out. Now what I've got here is a jumper cable that I've made. It's just got 2 black ball lock disconnects on the end, a couple of John Guest fittings, you know, and it doesn't have to be any great length. It just needs to be able to pump the gelatine into our all-rounder. So here's my beer in the all-rounder. It's been cold crashing now for over a week. So we're going to get the airlock or the spunding valve up and out of the way. Don't need that anymore. We're going to come in and hook up our beer disconnect to the yellow disconnect, and then hook up our bottle with the gelatine in it. And push it all into the fermenter. Now, if you don't get it on your first go, you can always put more CO2 into this and have another go. But the important thing is to now pop that off and purge, make sure that line is purged with your CO2. So that way, the first point you pour out of that is not going to be covered or a gelatine beer. And that's it. We just let that sit now for about 2 or 3 days, and that will be crystal clear when it comes out of there. Now, I'm sure someone's going to say, but I don't have a pressure fermenter. So if you've got a traditional fermenter, unlike the Coopers, where you can just lift the lid of the bucket up, do it very gently and quickly, just get in there and pour it in. You still do the same thing. This time you're just going to hook up your disconnect, but you're not going to add any CO2 pressure other than just purging that little bit of oxygen out. Then with your sanitised tube, you're going to feed that after you take your airlock out. Turn your bottle upside down and just squeeze. Pop your hose back out, bung your airlock back in, and you're good to go. Minimal disturbance, and you're not filling your fermenter full of oxygen. And what that jumper cable looks like is just some 8mm beer line with one John Guest fitting and a black ball lock disconnect. Now here's another option that I've devised. If you're going to use colloidal or silica or something that doesn't have a lot of liquid, so if we're only going to use 20ml a dose, all you do is unscrew that off that fitting there, draw up your fining agent, screw that back together and simply push that on, and with a bit of brute force you can overcome the pressure in the oil rounder or your pressure fermenter and push your fining agent into the actual pressure fermenter with nothing more than a syringe. Pretty simple, right? So someone's going to ask me how long I cold crash for. Well, at least 48 hours, a week if I've got the fridge space. The colder and longer, the tighter the yeast cake compacts. When it's finished, I let it warm up before I start cleaning anything, so I don't shock any of my fermenters with that sudden rapid temperature change. It's bad for the plastics, and it's even more dangerous when you start getting into glass carboys if you're still using them. So there you go, cold crashing and finings made super simple. Drop the temperature, add your finings, and whether you're in a pressure fermenter or a Cooper's bucket, you can still use the PET bottle hack and keep the oxygen out. Look, thanks heaps for your support. Honestly, it means the world. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with your mates, especially the one that's serving you a New England Pilsner. That's not a thing. That is definitely not a thing. So if you do this right, you'll be pouring beers that look like they belong in a pub, not in a mud puddle. Oh, and if you haven't checked it out already, I'll leave a link just here to the Spotify playlist that we built for the channel members. It's yours. Get in there and add your favourite tunes. I'll catch you on the next one. Remember, life's too short to drink dodgy beers. Cheers. Oh yeah.